Take us through the challenges of running a business in these times, and what are the solutions that you're looking for, and what are your priorities?
The focus first was to do with protecting your staff, connecting with the customer, and making sure that the services are continuing to be delivered. Forward, I think if you look at the cash flow points that were said by my colleagues in this conference call, people have had to make really difficult decisions. And the issue is that it is actually difficult to make a decision while you don't have enough information. So we've seen in some things that are unprecedented in the sense that as regard to the employees, we see people saying, look, I'll put people on a unpaid leave for some time until we have better visibility on what's going to happen next. Sure. In a sense that while they want to be able to alleviate the burden of expenses on employees and so forth, they still want to maintain a strong position so that they are ready to tackle the market when things start opening. So you may be shooting yourself in the foot if you start really get rid of everybody in some sense. Great. We've been kicking the can for a long period of time when it comes to labor reforms. And I think a lot has been discussed in the Tanfeed program and other sort of platforms. Ideas are there, but we need just to move on with implementing what has been agreed, because the way things are going at the moment are not actually sustainable. And we need to be able to create jobs in a meaningful way, rather than forcing people to just employ nationals for the sake of employing nationals. So that will be the essential thing to do. And secondly, I think in my view, it's creating the resilience in certain sectors. Because you see, people are talking about business continuity, and you sit on boards and people are talking about it's just a policy or a plan that is put in a document and then shelved somewhere. But with this crisis, I think it highlights the fact that having business continuity is something that is very essential, and that all the employees should be aware of it and be able to address it immediately and know what to do in a given moment in time. But more importantly, I think we should be talking again about the issue of diversification and less reliance on oil production for our revenue. And I think there will be a lot of sort of regulatory changes emanating from this crisis in terms of generating revenues for the government and actually bringing in a real cooperation and partnership between the government and the private sector. For me, I think that we are bound to see changes in the way the private sector is operating, particularly big family companies, that because they're playing a major part in the economy, and if they fail, the important thing is actually to sit down and say, what's going to happen? What are we going to do in the next crisis? At the moment, it's difficult for anybody to make a decision because of the uncertainties that I was talking about. Any business decision, you need to have visibility, you need to have clarity, you need to have enough information to allow you to make a decision. With the point that Saidna was mentioning, I think, maybe people are still in this lockdown mentality and so forth. But I think when we go through this, there will be still opportunities. But the important thing I was trying to mention is that we need, in building this resilience and in going into this in-country value using the same terminology that we've been talking about, I think we need to go into which sector will have to be or is critical for a crisis like this, so that when things happen, you are able to use those industries, those factories for things that were not within their core business, to allow you to manufacture the thing that you need actually, as we have seen with PDO and other companies sort of manufacturing sanitizers and masks and so forth. So these industries need to be here locally rather than relying on. Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to say that it's actually, again, maybe I'm posing difficulties, but I'm saying it before we talk about confidence and how it will pick up, we need to discuss who will survive this crisis. And I believe that there will be a number of entities that will go down. There will be insolvencies and bankruptcies, and people need to cater for that. Secondly, I think the world out there beyond this crisis will be for those companies that were, as a matter of principle, well run, with corporate governance and business ethics and systems and processes in place in all respect. I think those are the companies that will be able to just, in some way survive this crisis. But more importantly, I think with anything, there will be opportunities, and I envisage that there will be a lot of companies that will be taken over and move on from there. It is true that for any investment in the industries, it will be really difficult to assume that you're building a factory in Oman only to serve Oman economy or Oman market. We have been living the responsibility of marketing abroad to these small companies that are setting up in Sohar and so forth, or in Dokum or whatever. I think that the government role here will need to be essential. It's not just about a free trade agreement or attending a conference or an exhibition in China or in Japan or in Korea or whatever. But it would be, I think it needs to go beyond that, in a sense that for any industry that is set up in Oman, they should be adopted in a sense that, we need to actually make sure that such products get access in other markets and identify a specific market that these things should be sold, and maybe even to go to the extent of it. I mean, but I want to take you back a little bit on the Arab Spring situation. It was the biggest crisis we've seen during that time. And sitting there, we thought that it's not going to be a business as usual anymore. But unfortunately, we took drastic decisions at the time from the government and private sector point of view. But a few years down the road, we came back to the business as usual mode. I think that going forward, you've seen how the Supreme Council responsible for coronavirus handling was approaching the issues in terms of, and I really commend them. They met, discussed, issued decision, discussed, issued decision. I think this approach should continue while we're dealing with the aftermath of this crisis. And this applies not just from the government point of view, but also on the private sector point of view. Boards should be sitting there, making decisions rather than parking decision for a consultant to come with a new study and then the study keeps shelved somewhere. People need to take a risk. People need to be able to speed up, not just in terms of making decisions, but to oversee the implementation and making sure that what they have decided is actually implemented. And that will help building the confidence and get us out of this crisis.
Majid, and you've been talking about saying that the tools and strategies of the past are not going to be effective in future. Please come in and then I'll come to Pankaj.
No, I think, again, the learnings that we had in the Arab Springs are also implementable here. And Steve was with me when I was on the board of OPAL. We had the crisis and we could see everybody, all the players in the oil industry meeting, sharing views, are agreeing what need to be done and move forward. And there was a secretariat allocated to contact the stakeholders, making sure that things are happening. I think also that collaboration is key. I mean, at the moment, you could see that the same that was happening in the oil industry should happen in other sectors. I would like to see, for instance, a society of hospitality, companies. I would like to see a society of power producers and so forth, so that by them working together, they'll be able to devise solutions that are taking care of the interests of everybody in that sort of sector, and therefore allowing the government to be able to react to these challenges and participate in the solution. So it's not a bottom-up approach. It's not a up-down approach, but it's also a bottom-up approach.
Yeah, Pankaj?
Really loans and facilities that these SMEs or companies are having. And I think, judging from what I've seen so far in terms of the flexibilities that were introduced by the central bank, I could foresee that there will be additional sort of measures that are taken to allow banks to restructure loans and without really taking a big hit out of that specific sort of transactions.
There's a question. Paul Callaghan has asked, saying that, is the gradual opening of the economy over the next 4 to 5 weeks a workable solution? Do you think it's a pragmatic approach? Anyone? Majid? Can we open up this economy in the 4 to 5 weeks?
I think that would be really challenging, really difficult to say, because the world now is interdependent. You can open here, but if your neighbors are closed, if the other parties that you're dealing with are closed, how can you really, assume that you'll come back and business will be as usual? Normalcy cannot be taken for granted. It's just to take some time for the economy to come back where it was. I mean, I'll give you an example. A friend from the oil industry was saying that, look, with the oil crisis, it is difficult to shut down as it is difficult to actually find oil. So even with an industry like that, not finding where to download the oil, if the shutdown is going to continue, I'm certain that, at least from what I've heard, is that the oil sector will not come back on full stream until they manage to really beef up the operation to the level they were in before the crisis.
Majid, yeah, Majid, please, quick.
No, I think a quick one was consolidation. The opportunities will come from consolidation, really. And this issue has been there for a long period of time in many sectors, talking about banking sector, insurance sector, and the like. And I think this crisis will force companies to accept merging, to accept that, having a bigger entity is actually more resilient and more beneficial to the stakeholders, to the shareholders, and everybody. There was a degree of stagnation in terms of, people taking that risk of clubbing with other companies in a particular sector. But I think this crisis will create an opportunity in that respect.
Mohammed Al-Mashni says, what will be the reaction of unemployed Omanis if they see companies are releasing employees instead of finding other solutions? Will this make the private sector less attractive? Anyone? Stephen, Pankaj?
Well, where do you go then? I mean, the government sector is already saturated. We were talking about the Omanization policy and the benefit and the downside of it. I think that, in other countries, being unemployed is not something that is unusual. And we need to, we have been talking, and Steve may remember, During the Arab springtime, we were talking about the right to hire and fire and the right to, having business more efficient and so forth. The solutions will have to be devised or found by the government and the private sector in collaboration. But I think these people will have nowhere to go.